At an industry level, what approaches or frameworks do you find are most effective for building an operational control plane for AI agents?
A way to build on an operational control plane for agents is very much mirrors how we started it with humans, with employees. Because that way you can start looking at what role does this agent play in my organization? What applications does it have access to? Where do I need to restrict how it operates and where it runs? And that's going to be a combination of traditional identity types, and then role entitlement details around machine accounts and how they can connect into them. And then finally, it's policy enforcement.
As organizations move toward multi-agent systems and coordinated agent collaboration, how do you see identity controls evolving?
Today, we operate in a world of an organization where I have a manager, he has my manager has a manager. It's very traditionally hierarchical. And the way agents have started to evolve, especially, going back over a couple of years now that they've been in market and had some experimentation, as you highlighted, where they were not in production, they were in sandbox, they were trying to see how they were going to operate. And then as those evolved, each one of these agents became peers. And they really operated as individual peers flat within an organization, completing very specific trained tasks.
Welcome to the Security Strategist podcast, where we have a weekly conversation with people impacting the enterprise tech landscape. My name is Alejandro Leal. I'm a senior analyst at KuppingerCole. And in this episode, we are joined by Matt Fangman, field CTO at SailPoint. Today, we will be talking about what AI agents mean for identity security. As companies rapidly build and deploy agents in cloud environments, many are finding they have created a new layer of identities. This often happens without the protections, ownership, or visibility that they depend on for humans and service accounts. To explore what is actually happening in the market, the risks involved, and the future of identity security, we have Matt with us. Hi, Matt. How are you? Thank you for being here.
I'm well, Alejandro. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Maybe we can set the stage and have a conversation about the big changes that we've seen in the industry. As we know, the industry is going through a big shift from traditional identity models to AI-driven agent-based systems. So from your perspective, what do you think has fundamentally changed in the last 12 to 18 months that makes identity for agents such an urgent issue?
I think there are two major trends that are really emerging. One is the ability for new AI agents and their capability for reasoning. The new large language models that have been developed by many of the cloud service providers hosted on the web are really becoming quite sophisticated to the point where I can train them on specific goals. I can give them objectives. I can now publish tools for them to use and leverage. And now I also have the capability of having those agents connect with each other. And what that is realizing for many of our large organizations that we work with every day is that they're really looking at these agents as a way to scale their existing workforce as virtual workers and really a new way to add a new identity type into their organization to run at scale in larger and larger markets.
Yes, I think that we have moved from, let's say, the agents being an experimental sort of helpers to real operational actors inside business systems. Now they read data, they trigger workflows, they make decisions. And I guess that's something that wasn't really happening at scale a year ago. And that leads me to my second question. So one of the challenges that we see in the market is the lack of visibility into provisioned and operational agents, which can lead to thousands of shadow agents. Why is this blind spot so common? And what risks does it pose for identity governance and security teams?
It's a really interesting challenge for the identity teams. There are basically four distinct groups that I see when I work with large customers, large organizations on their adoption of AI technologies, specifically agents. And there are different groups that are involved. One is the cloud operations team, because usually they're implemented through some cloud scale provider, GCP, Amazon, Microsoft. The second part is the identity teams usually don't have visibility because the team that's been driving is really the AI team. They've been really focused on developing the agent, giving it direction, training it on data, focusing on its goal, and ensuring that the reasoning model works within that to complete whatever task that you're assigning that agent to go complete. And then the final team, once the identity team has been, they assign some level of permissions to it, then the security operations team. So we're seeing a lot more involvement from the security operations center, making sure these agents are behaving well, completing the tasks that they're assigned, and not coloring outside the lines, getting into systems or tools that they shouldn't have access to. So it's a really complex problem that involves a lot of teams as they bring them into the organization.
Yeah, that's right. It's a complex problem, and it's now involving the collaboration of multiple teams. And the risk is huge. It creates this governance vacuum where security teams cannot enforce policy or respond effectively when something goes wrong. And, there's a lot of talk about adding guardrails for these agents, such as policy enforcement, behavioral logging, and just-in-time access. At an industry level, what approaches or frameworks do you find are most effective for building an operational control plane for AI agents?
I think a way to build on an operational control plane for agents is very much mirrors how we started it with humans, with employees. Because that way you can start looking at what role does this agent play in my organization? What applications does it have access to? Where do I need to restrict how it operates and where it runs? And that's going to be a combination of traditional identity types, and then role entitlement details around machine accounts and how they can connect into them. And then finally, it's policy enforcement. I think right now we're going to see a transition very, very quickly from traditional long-standing, what we call birthright permissions for a person that has a role. I think you're going to start seeing more and more of that, especially due to agents and how quickly agents are evolving into removing a lot more standing permissions, birthright permissions, and now moving to more just-in-time permissions. And so there are two new standards that I think are really important that I know SailPoint is focused on, and that is just-in-time or JIT-A authorization, as well as JIT-P for just-in-time provisioning. And I think those two have the capability of really having windows that we can allow actions for these agents to take place, but remove that long, broad standing permission. Because one of the things that I've found, especially working with some of our larger customers, agents do discover each other. They do share tools. And the only way that we can start ensuring that we restrict those behaviors and those actions is to remove some of those permissions to ensure that they can't execute that.
That's very interesting. And as organization, let's say they move toward multi-agent systems and coordinated agent collaboration, how do you see identity controls evolving? For example, what new capabilities will security teams need to manage these collaborative systems?
It's interesting to see how today we operate in a world of an organization where I have a manager, my manager has a manager. It's very traditionally hierarchical. And the way agents have started to evolve, especially, going back over a couple of years now that they've been in market and had some experimentation, as you highlighted, where they were not in production, they were in sandbox, they were trying to see how they were going to operate. And then as those evolved, each one of these agents became peers. And they really operated as individual peers flat within an organization, completing very specific trained tasks. And how I see this evolving, especially now due to some great work by Anthropic with Model Context Protocol, as well as Google's agent-to-agent protocol, we're going to start seeing agents have the ability to not only connect with each other, discover each other, but also start to form into systems, hierarchies, just like we do for people. And so that way you're going to see an orchestrator agent come in that is going to be autonomous, that will have very broad standing goals. And I can start seeing and imagine seeing task-driven agents where I want to look at access certification, or I want to look at permissions, or, I want to look at something, tools access or behavior tracking. I then can build those specific task agents into what we're calling a multi-agent system. And I can see that evolving very quickly because we're seeing the adoption of a lot of this technology becoming much more broad and much more consistent across the industry.
Do you think this evolution also means that identity in a way becomes more about managing relationships and context and not just individual actors?
It's a great observation, Alejandro. I really do believe that's probably the case. I can see contextual, let me just provide some tangible examples. Alejandro, if you and I are communicating back and forth with each other, I know that you're on a corporate issued device. You're on a known network. It's a known location where you've been logging in from previously. I know and have pretty high confidence that we are having a specific conversation. And I can apply that same context for agents. So that way, if an agent does appear, potentially not on a known network or trying to access machine accounts that it shouldn't have access to, I can go ahead and start taking action. I think that context is going to be incredibly important to help ensure that other ephemeral agents that just randomly appear in your organization, actually have a level of control and management to them.
That makes sense. Thank you for providing that example. Perhaps the last question for CISOs who may already be realizing they have more agents than they previously thought. What's the one strategic move they should focus on in the next year to keep ahead of the identity risks created by this shift to agent-based operations?
I think it's twofold. One is just allowing the ability for agents to have an identity that is associated with the corporation or with your organization. If you can get inventory of the agent, assign it an identity, track and log its behavior, that is going to go a long way to getting control of it. Because we're seeing shadow AI being brought in from a variety of different folks. I've had an example from this most recently this fall. I'm working with a large organization, and as they brought in interns over the summer, they'd start rolling out some agents that were not necessarily approved or had gone through a traditional front door process to bring them into the organization. And the CISO had to scramble. And what I don't like doing is having those fire drills, those emergencies where I need to go to the CISO and really have a conversation about, hey, let's really start thinking about doing discovery across them. Let's locking them down. And really, I'd rather have this follow their normal change control. So I think just inventory, getting a level of detail on those things, and then start behavior logging, tracking for those agents to start ensuring that they're operating as you want them to.
Yeah, I agree. I think this foundational visibility is perhaps the fastest way to reduce risk and the first step by looking at the inventory and making sure you know what you have in your organization. Any last words? Maybe what would you say is the main takeaway of this conversation today?
My main takeaway, Alejandro, is that I think identities for agents is going to be the new identity type that people are going to have to pay attention to. You're going to have to think about how we're going to connect into your main agent clearinghouses and marketplaces, the Amazons, the Bedrock Cores, Google's new, Vertex AI and the new Gemini capabilities that they've been releasing, as well as Microsoft. All of them are advancing very, very rapidly, and just getting control of those basics right now, I think is going to be super important for the enterprise organizations.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Matt, for joining us today. I appreciate all the insights.
Thank you.
And also, thank you to everyone listening. We hope you took a lot away from today's podcast. And for further information on what we talked about, please head over to sailpoint.com or reach out to Matt. We'll be back next week with another episode. And until then, make sure to subscribe to this podcast on all platforms and follow the conversation on our socials at EM360Tech on X and LinkedIn. And for more content, head over to m360tech.com. Thank you.